Bryan Canter, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's great to be back with you again.
Author consultant, publishing consultant. We had you on a few months ago to talk about the whole crazy, interesting, intricate world of Amazon ads and how to best take advantage of those. And you had floated a number of topics, and I wanted to get you back on to chat some more about some of the conversations you have with all the folks you work with. And we zeroed in on one particular topic, which I think is endlessly interesting about just helping authors shape their careers, particularly around first-time authors. So that's the subject today, and I just kind of want to dive right in without going into a whole lot of setup or anything, because I think the idea and the issue is right there for all of us, even first-time authors, midterm, middle of the career authors. We always think about sort of how do we approach this? Where's the playbook? Where's the rule book? And how does this work? Who do you mostly work with younger first-time authors?
Yeah, so at My Word Publishing, we kind of coach people through the independent publishing process, and it's almost always not every time, but it's almost always with their first book. And I'm a fiction specialist with them. We cover the gamut. Most of the other consultants work mostly with nonfiction and business and things like that. But I'm a fiction specialist, so a lot of my authors are first time fiction authors, and that's part of the reason that I really dove into to looking at this and to interviewing a lot of other authors, successful authors, fiction authors that I knew personally, people that I met at conferences and things like that. But I did that for two reasons. One was to kind of serve my clients on the publishing side, since many of them are first time fiction authors, and then also I'm a fiction author, so I wanted to take a look at this for myself and say, hey, what does this really take to be somebody that's a full-time career author? By the way, I do want to preface all of this because some can start off like a little bit scary. I want to preface this with there is nothing wrong with doing this as a hobby. If you just want to write for a hobby and you want to kind of get a few books out there and stuff like that, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
That's a good objective assessment of your goals to begin with. But if you want to do it as an author business, to develop an income from it, or to get even just widely known, with a significant following, it takes some work.
Yeah, sure does. Uh, and just before we kind of get into that advice, for those who are choosing to go beyond the hobby status, I guess, do you at all like get to a fork in the road with your clients as they come in and say, do you want to think about traditional publishing?
So I do always, when we're starting off, I always ask them what their goals are. I mean, that's like one of my number one questions, and it's not just to shape what we do with them, because it's very, very different. If somebody does just want to do something as a hobby, how much are we going to put into it in terms of the professional services that we're using and things like that? Yeah, because you're very aware, I'm sure, of the costs involved in independent publishing. And, so if somebody doesn't really want to do this, potentially as a career, then there are some cheaper options that we can give them to keep their costs in check. Um, it, Interestingly, and I'm not going to jump into this, but you mentioned transition to traditional. There's I wish I had it handy so I could even throw you a link or something like that. But Thomas Umstattd runs the Novel Marketing Podcast, which is the
Yeah.
longest running novel marketing podcast in the world. And 3 or 4 episodes ago, he interviewed an author who he tried to publish trad, didn't, sent out his 50 query letters, didn't quite make it. Um, one of his agents that he sent the letter to said, "Look, buddy, I'm sorry, nobody's going to be interested in your book. Look at indie." So he went indie. He was very successful with that book, he got picked up by HarperCollins and, or no, Thomas Nelson. I'm sorry, Thomas Nelson, and he transitioned over to Trad, stayed with them for to republish that first book, went with them again for a second book, and then said, you know what, I'm going to buy my rights back because I liked the indie model much better and was in his mind doing better as an indie than he was trad. So
Yeah.
we don't necessarily, when we're talking, we're walking people through the independent publishing process. So we don't necessarily recommend that, they've really made that decision by the time they get to us, or at least we talk them through the options before we'll even sign them up as a client. It's like, hey, are you aware of your options within the publishing world? What's the difference between traditional and indie? And if this is the way you want to go, then maybe we're the right fit for you, and maybe we're not.
Right. Right. Very good. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things just occurs to me before we get into the sort of advice that you do provide to first-time authors in particular. Um, as somebody who's watched the publishing world for quite a while and this whole issue around indie and traditional, there's the outliers, and I don't mean to be you know casting shade on your example at all or at all. There's always these outliers that sound like, oh my, this is totally possible. And then there's the sort of the mean, which is what happens to most writers in terms of when they look at it and when they go into independent publishing, what is the reality around being one of the many authors who publish an independent book next year and are looking for eyeballs, readers, and or shelf space. And it's just a very, very it's a challenging uh, option and decision you have to make as a individual writer who's going into this, and what kind of time and investment and organization and plan do you bring to your craft? So let's kind of get into what is the My Word Publishing, what does the Bryan Canter consultation look like in terms of giving those first time authors a feeling of that they can get in there and do it.
Yeah, and part of that is a kind of a big reality check. Now, I will tell you, we do talk through the different options. We obviously specialize in coaching people through the independent publishing process, but you mentioned a few things. Looking at the averages and also looking at all of the pieces and parts that you have to put together. So if you're indie publishing, you have to look at it very holistically as an entire business. You're not talking about just writing your book and having somebody else publish it for you. All of a sudden, you're looking at learning the craft of writing, because quite honestly, unfortunately, most of my first-time authors, I'll ask them, how many books have you read on the craft of writing? And the vast majority of them say, none, or what's
Yeah.
that, or something like
Yeah.
that. And so,
Yeah.
really, they're kind of naive when they're coming into this thing. I read a lot of books, and so therefore I must be good at writing. And it's, as you know, it's a skill that takes time to develop and hone. But you're learning the craft of writing. You're learning the world of editing, which can be a very emotional shock, because you're going to have somebody professionally telling you what's wrong with everything that you've written. That's their job, is to find out what's wrong and fix it. So you're learning writing, you're learning editing, you're learning the publishing process. All the things of cover design, interior layout, getting your ISBNs, doing your file uploads, which platform am I going to go, narrow, or am I going to go wide? All of those things. And then you're also learning the business aspects, which includes not only marketing, because if you're an indie publisher, you're all of those things. You're the team coordinator for your team of editors, cover designers, interior layout designers, all that kind of stuff, as well as the you're going to be the marketing manager for your company. And oh, by the way, you really need to have a company. If you're going to have an author business, it actually needs to be a business. And so you're probably going to be doing some or all of your own accounting and, things like that too. So it's a lot, and transitioning into that, for your first book, you're kind of learning all of those pieces all at once. And um, so that's kind of challenging. Um, I don't know
Yeah.
if you have any comments or personal perspectives to offer on that kind of thing.
Well, I absolutely agree with everything you just said. Especially starting the business and getting that set up. It is a income outcome kind of a situation, and you need to be formal about it, and you need to take that discrete idea and look at it so you can keep track of really how much you're putting into that business and also what kind of revenue it's generating back. Well, ultimately you're going to want to do that, so get it going. And I loved the other thing I just completely agree with is the emotional impact of being edited and getting to that point. That I've never really thought of it in those terms, but that is a reality check and a half when you finally give your manuscript to somebody who is not a friend, who has standards over here, and they want you to apply your story to those standards. And it's just not even a close call in terms of what that can mean to you and your headspace if somebody's ripping apart your precious masterpiece that you think is all done. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. A rejection actually is one of the concepts that I talk about when we're talking about the different kinds of publishing. And this is probably a shocker to a lot of people. In the independent publishing world, you have the editing, which is a feeling of rejection or criticism and stuff like that. And then, of course, after it's out there, you're going to get all of those. You're going to get ratings, and if you don't get any 1 or 2 star ratings, you probably haven't really written a book, or you haven't somebody other than your best friends to read it. Because it's not possible to please everybody, and somebody's going to read it and not like it. So you get a little bit of that too. You also have that same kind of experience on the traditional publishing world. It's just front loaded. Right. You still have to deal with the editors, but
sure.
load is you're probably going to send out somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70 query letters, over a period of probably a year or more before you find an agent who's willing to take your book on. And you just kind of got to understand they're not telling you your work is not any good. They might just be telling you, hey, you write really well, but there's not a market for this right now, and we're in
Right.
business to sell books and that kind of thing. So you're going to face that kind of rejection, and if you don't have a little bit of a tough skin, it's going to be hard to be an author having a career as an author, either traditionally or independently published.
Yeah, I actually think that writers starting out will be surprised to find that actually rejection and getting rejected is good. Now, it sounds like crazy talk if you're just starting out, but if you get rejected and if you get some feedback from a professional agent and maybe a professional editor, chalk it up as a success. Somebody took the time to give you feedback, use that feedback. The fact that you got rejected as a badge of honor, as a good thing, is guess what that means? That means you're trying. That
Yeah.
means you are making the effort to get published and it will happen. You are in the loop of making progress. You are not sitting back on your precious masterpiece wondering when to take it out or whether to take it out. You are actually bringing it to the marketplace, and the marketplace is giving you some advice.
And that's what the other sticker shock that we get obviously in the independent publishing world is what the costs look like, and particularly, for example, the developmental edit. We recommend a full scope of editing, so developmental, copy line, and improve, right? If you really want to have a book that's high enough quality that it has the opportunity to compete in the marketplace, you really need that. And people look at that and obviously balk at the costs that are involved in that, particularly in a developmental edit. But what you're getting is a one-on-one, almost college education in creative writing focused on your book. It's a one-on-one. You didn't take a big class with 100 people in it. You sit down one-on-one with somebody who's a professional in the field and it's providing you, and that's invaluable. I'm not sure how you can calculate the value of that if, again, you're planning on setting up a writing career.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. So, kind of just thinking about the reality check for starting out writers, what can you walk us through some of those basics? What are some of the reality check kind of, kind of red flags, warning flags you want to make sure authors are equipped with before they dive in?
Yeah, and the first thing is particularly for fiction authors, a little bit different for nonfiction authors. You can have a
Yeah.
different platform and opportunities to make your book profitable. But we're in the entertainment in this industry, and for the readers, it's all about entertainment. And you're competing with all those other forms of entertainment that are out there, right? Everything from social media to television, movies, and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's the field that you're in. And then you look at fiction authors in particular. On average, by the way, Written Word Media does they do a survey of indie authors every year. They publish their results online for free. They have about 1,500 respondents, so that's not everybody in the independent writing world, but it's a good cross section, and they get people that are all the way across all of the different levels, if you will, of property. And on average, it takes a fiction author 6 to 10 books to become profitable. And by profitable, I don't mean you're making a full-time living off of it. By profitable, I mean you're making more than you're spending on your business costs, the publishing costs, and marketing costs, and all of that kind of stuff. I went to Colorado Gold when I was just starting out. Went to a workshop there, and the lady there had published 90 plus books, um, and she said, I didn't really even take off until after book six. She
Yeah.
said I had published my first one, two, three, four, 5 books. I finally get to six, and book six kind of helped start the other ones start to sell. And I get so many of my authors that'll come in and I'll say, "What are your goals? Do you plan on developing a career as an independent, fiction author?" And they'll say, "Well, let me try with this book and see how it goes." And I said, "Well, I can save you a lot of time right now. You're not going to be profitable on this book. I promise you, you're not going to.
Yeah.
There's very, very few J.K. Rowlingses out there that are going to have a debut novel that takes off and smokes. It's
Mm.
probably going to take you 6 books, and you'll probably sell more copies of book one after you've sold book six than you do, the entire time before that. So 6 to 10 books to become profitable. Um, if you want to have a full-time income as an author, again, according not just this written word media survey, but lots of supporting information that you can find on the internet, you're probably going to be looking in the neighborhood of 25 to 40 books before you can develop a full-time income. And by full-time income there, I mean somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to $60,000 a year. Um, it's just, I mean, it comes kind of down to math a little bit, and the fact that there's 110,000 print novels published every year in the English language. That is around 300 a day, and over 4 million ebooks published on Kindle, through the Amazon store and stuff like that. So just because you have even a fantastic quality manuscript that you've gotten edited and you've got a professional cover design and you've got, good interior layout and all that kind of stuff, and you throw it up there on Amazon, the chances that somebody just finds it are pretty slim. So you got to work to
Yeah.
build up a following.
I often ask folks when they chat with me about starting out their careers, to that point, I say, how many books a year do you read? Do you read 2 or 3 books a month? Well, that's 24, 30, 35 books a year, 36 books a year. So put that in the context of that 110,000 novels coming out every year. Which of those 110,000 books are you reading? How did you find out about those books? look at it, chances are it was word of mouth. There was a friend who said, "You got to read this." So, I mean, it's just putting that whole thing in perspective. Yeah. I want to
Yeah.
push back a little bit. Did you say, or maybe I didn't hear you right, that you need to write 25 or 30 novels until that's really going to pay off? I mean, that seems, if you're maybe second career and you've retired and you want to take a stab at your first novel at age 60 or something, that's going to seem like a deal killer.
Yeah. So again, and part of what I'm going to hear is a couple of different approaches that you can take that might be different depending on your stage in life, the ability to put full-time effort into something that might be start off as a hobby, your ability to have some capital to live on to begin with, and things like
Right.
that. So
Right.
there's some difference, but again, out of that survey that and 1,500 authors is a relevant sample size. It's not
Sure.
the clearest one, but it's supported by other documentation. 6% of the people in that survey make between $2,500 and $5,000 a month. 6% of those people, and those people have an average of 40 novels published
Whoa.
that make
Whoa.
2,500 to 5,000 a month. Now, again, indie publishing, not trad. Although your royalties in indie are much higher than they are in trad, but you're not going to get in bookstores as an indie author, and not on Barnes and Noble and stuff like that. 5% make 5 to 10,000, and then 5% make over $10,000 a month. So you have the good news is there's 21% of indie published authors that are making a full-time income, but there's also 80% that are not. And now in that survey, they also said, well, about 47% of people actually wanted to make money as an author. That was their intention, was to develop a career as an independently published author. So 41% of the people, that's their goal. About 20% said, hey, it's just a hobby I just want to throw out there. There were another 15% that they don't just want to make a career, but they want to become a household name. My goal is for the average Joe on the street, to be the next Brandon Sanderson or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of a hard reality to look at. Now, it doesn't necessarily take that. There are other examples and other people in the author track that are approaching it differently, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to look into these different career paths. I modeled these. I just made them up off of interviewing other authors and talking to other authors and that kind of stuff. So there's no such thing as three possible paths of an indie career path. There's an infinite number of paths, but my purpose in doing this was just to lay out three structured possibilities and get people to kind of think about how they would approach that in advance. By the way, I just a few days ago listened to your January 31st interview with Scott Graham on the kind of long series approach,
Yep.
and a lot of great insights in there. But one of the things that really just kind of resonated with me and stuck with me is you have to be purposeful about this. So it certainly, if you're going to write a series, you need to be very purposeful about that. Think about it in advance. Plan it out. What you want to accomplish, how you're going to do that, everything from your main antagonist and your supporting characters and things like that to the overall theme of the series. But you got to take that same approach. You got to really have a long view if you're going to develop a career as an indie fiction author. Just three historical examples, just because some of these are household names. It took C.S. Lewis 12 years from when he started writing to the time that he wrote Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, which and,
Yep.
and, and originally He didn't even plan that necessarily to be a series. He hoped it would become a series, but he released it. If you look at the original releases, none of them say book one, or the Chronicles of Narnia series or anything like that, because he didn't know if that book one was going to take off or not. So 12 years. James Patterson took 17 years from the time he wrote his first novel and published it to when he got his first breakout, if you will, was Along Came a Spider. And Brandon Sanderson had written 12 novels before he wrote Elantris, which was kind of his one of his breakouts. So, the idea that you're going to write a book, get it published, throw it up on Amazon, and launch your career, and next year you're going to be amazingly popular and sell
Yeah.
thousands of books. The average indie book sells less than excuse me, I apologize. Get that. Let me get that statistic so I'm quoting it
Yeah.
correctly. 90% of self-published books sell less than 100 copies.
Yep.
The
Yep.
average self-published title sells around 250. And so average, of
Yep.
course, is median. It's average. You're lumping at all those that sell, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of copies. So the average one sells 250 copies. 90% sell less than 100 copies. You can't
Yep.
build a career on a book that sells, less than 250 copies.
No. And that's a year. That's not a month. That's a year. So,
Ooh,
yeah.
no, no, no.
So,
That's lifetime.
that's lifetime. Okay. Gotcha. 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 Yeah.
90% sell less than 100 copies in their lifetime, and the average one's 50 or copies or less in its lifetime. So
Right. Yeah.
it's a hard market out there. But again, 20% of those people out there that set out to intentionally make this a career are successful doing it.
Right.
Um,
And and
so
and there was a sort of related stat from the traditional world when the two publishing houses were trying to buy each other out. I can't remember which of the big five was trying to buy each other out, and there was all this court
Penguin Random
documentation.
House was
Peng,
trying to
Peng,
buy out. Oh shoot, Simon and Schuster.
yeah. And in the court documentations, in the sort of depositions and the data that came through, there were these shocking numbers around traditional publishing and how even the big houses putting out books that they had probably offered good size advances or medium size advances and gotten their whole big five publishing machines behind these authors and had sold so few books. I mean, in some cases, less than 100 copies of a book, or even smaller than that. It was stunning.
Yeah, the statistic was 25% sell less than 12 copies.
Something like, yeah, it was great. That's it. I think, yeah, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah, so
nuts.
that was in the deposition, and they didn't. So nobody went back and really fact checked the number, but
Yeah,
nobody in the court case said challenged it. Nobody said, "What are you talking about? That's ridiculous."
yeah,
They
yeah,
throw the statistic out there.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Wait,
that is challenging in the trad world. The way that those numbers shook out. 85% of you fall in one of three categories. 85% of books don't make back the costs of publishing the book. Yeah, most of them don't get an advance, but even if you do get an advance, that's part of it. But 85% don't make back the costs of publishing the book. 10% break even, and 5% they make all their money on 5%. And that's important because when you look at marketing, they're going to give you pre-launch, launch, and 30 days after launch to determine which one of those three categories you're in. If you're in the 85%, that's the last that you're going to hear from your publisher on marketing because they're not getting anything from you for you at that point. If you're in the
yeah,
10%, they're going to put enough money, time, and effort into getting you to break even. And then if you're in 5%, then you get all the marketing effort and dollars and all of that kind of stuff. So it really does end up become, by the way, that court case wasn't addressing your bottom rank authors. it was the court case was brought, as an antitrust case, but the main people that they were looking at were the very ultra successful authors that they were comparing their advances and what kind of advances they were getting and that kind of thing. So it was really dealing with the 5% that was kind of the issue of the court case.
So when you put the numbers you just offered from independent land and you put them together with the numbers that came out of that lawsuit, you can put those together and get a pretty clear picture of what you're up against, which is important. Let's go back to the business idea. If you're a businessman starting out with a business and you go to the bank and look for a loan, and here's your business plan, and you do an analysis of what the market is, you're probably going to get a lot of bankers say, no, this is not a good idea to invest in this company. So, my point is, you're about to, as an individual, invest in your own company, and you need to come up with a plan. Because if you don't have a plan going into this business, there's not I mean, 90, I don't know what the numbers are, but let's just say that most businesses require a plan to be successful. You can't just wing it. And I would argue in the publishing world, probably double or triple that statement. You cannot wing it in the publishing world.
Yeah. So a lot of authors, fiction authors, are pantsers, and that's fine for books if that's what you want to do for your writing. But you can't be a
That's me.
pantser about your business because it's you have to plan this out. You have to take the long view. You also have to commit up front. Right. My first several books, 4, 5, 6 books that I write, they're going to be a loss to me, but they're going to be my learning process. They're going to be establishing my foundation. They're going to be the time when I'm building up my infrastructure and things like that. Because some of the prerequisites that we talk about that you have to have if you're going to be able to compete in this business, you have to have high quality books, which means you have to pay for editing. That first book, you might have to shell out the 2, 3, 4,000 bucks that it's going to take for editing and things like that to be able. You have to have professional cover design. You have to have professional interior layout. You got to have a professional quality book to be able to compete. And then you also kind of just mindset wise, you got to recognize you're in this hall. You got to put some basic marketing structure together. So, author website, email distribution service. You need to have some reader magnets or plan to develop some reader magnets and some, at least learning a little bit about paid ads to be able to compete in that arena. So I will tell you though, I want to interject because we talked about the hard luck case. I'm gonna skip forward and talk about one of the authors that I use as an example of one of these things. But I work. We mentioned in the last interview, I work with Lana Terry, out a successful writer, to do Amazon ads for people. Back about a year ago, September, so not last September, the previous year, she hit her first, as an indie author, she hit her first month of $100,000 gross sales
Wow. Wow.
in a month
Wow.
of her
Wow.
books. Now she's got 40 books, so she's got a significant backlist. But here's the real kicker, and this couldn't really happen, I don't think, in the trad world. As an indie author, her books were from 5 to 15 years old. She hadn't released a new book in 5 years, and yet she hit $100,000 gross sales in a month off of books that were 5 to 15 years old. So that's something where your books don't have to age out in the indie publishing world because you've got some marketing tools available to you that you don't in the other world. So what's in the realm of the possible is encouraging. Now she was spending $50,000 a month on Facebook ads. $50,000 a month on Facebook ads. But
Wow.
I'd
Wow.
take the difference there. I'd take the
Yeah.
$50,000 profit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Wow. And now at this point, she probably has enough fans out there that when she puts something out, the people are doing what I think is the number one way people read books is they're telling their friends, you got to read this series. You got to, and you probably are saying to your friend, boy, if you like this one, then you got 20 more to go, and that's a good
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, plus with all those books, she's got a following and an email distribution list of her readers. She knows
Right.
who her readers are. And when she publishes a new book, she's not reliant on somebody discovering it on Amazon. She sends them an email and says, "Hey, my next book just came out." By the way, she did launch another book last year, well, about 4 months ago. Did very well. Um,
Yeah.
she even turned her Amazon ads account over to me to run that for a little while to get it rolling and to show what can happen. That was a stand, not one of a series.
Right. Very
One of the
cool.
other things, by the way, long-term mindset. Just mention this. Obviously, you have to have the business minds. You have to realize you're going into this for the long haul. But you also really need to put together a book and or reading series plan, and that's one of the things that I really appreciated out of that interview that you had in January with Scott Graham, because it's planning that out. So not only do you have to have a plan for a series, but you also have to plan: am I going to launch a series right off the bat, or am I going to do some standalones first and things like that? And for new authors, I would really like to highlight this: please don't start off with a series. Everybody wants to. There's all kinds of benefits for doing that. You get the read through, you get the, save some time on character building and world building and stuff like that. So you don't have to put so much work into it. There's some advantages to that. But if you think about it, the first book you write better be the worst book you ever write. And do you really want the gateway into a series to be the worst book you ever write? So I strongly encourage our authors, don't start with a series, write in a set if you want to. So something that, can take advantage of the same world and stuff like that, but that it doesn't have to be read in the order of a series. You can enter into a set at any point and read those, because that way you're not going to put 4 or 5 years worth of effort into something that's the entrance gateway to that series is the worst book you ever write.
Yeah. This point cannot be underscored enough. And I think in some ways, one of the most shocking things every single writer learns in the end is that your writing is going to get so much better by book 6 or 7. And to the point where you're going to look back and almost want to unpublish book 1, even though at the time you thought it was wonderful and perfect and your friends thought it was amazing and you got some nice reviews on Amazon or wherever, and you did some book launches with 100 people, you might come back later and say, oh my God, no, that happened to me. So I know the feeling. I rewrote my first book several times as it got published by one publisher. When the next publisher wanted to publish book 2 in my series, a traditional publisher, small but traditional, they wanted to republish book 1. I had to go back and rewrite it just in a few years of what I had learned for book 2. Then, when the after book 3 and book 4 came out from a medium-sized publisher out of Minnesota, um, and I had written book 5, but I got dropped because my sales weren't enough. And then I decided to republish the whole series under my own brand. But I went back to book 1 and took a look at it. And again, even though I'd rewritten it twice, I was horrified at how my style and my storytelling ability had changed. So I went back and rewrote book 1 again and then published the whole series under my name. Book 1, uh, it was just below standard. I didn't need to touch book 2. 3, 4, 5 were all up to my level of thinking they worked. But that first
Yep.
book, I can't believe that people read it, and I can't believe it actually drew some nice reviews. The people were in one in the Denver Post and some other nice places, but boy, did where they were forgiving reviews. And that is such a mindset thing to get new writers to understand is your talent is going to improve.
And that's actually one of the things that I noticed with Scott. And you did ask him, hey, did you go back to that first book when you're getting ready to release your, 10th
Yeah.
anniversary edition of that? Did you have to rewrite much of it? He said no, but he said some key things earlier. He said, I had a whole bookshelf of unpublished manuscripts that I had written, that were close to publishable, but I never did. So it wasn't like that series was the first thing that he
Right.
had. And he had published some nonfiction books, so he was familiar with the publishing process. He wasn't trying to learn all of that all at one time together, writing, craft of writing, publishing, business, editing, all of that all at the same time. I'll tell you what, because I think we're starting to get long in the tooth, but
Yeah,
let
we
me
are.
run it
Sorry.
real quick.
That's my
The
fault.
three kind of career paths. No, both. We enjoy. It's good
Yeah, we do.
conversation.
Yeah.
Um, but the three kind of career paths that I mapped out, and I have examples of people that have done this successfully that I know. So authors I know personally. A momentum career path. And that one is build up to a rapid release. Now, I know you guys talked about this in that same episode and said, wow, I can't believe people are trying to just churn out books this fast. But build up to a rapid release of 3 to 4 books per year. But how do you do that? Structure that. Stage one is write 4 to 6 short stories in a year, and that may even be publishable, at least so you can submit them to anthologies or magazines or something like that. But at least write them. Stage two, spend a whole year writing your first novel. And refine that helps you to refine your writing skills, learn the publishing process, some minimal marketing skills, and create your that basic infrastructure that you need. And then in stage three, write 2 full-length novels per year for 2 years. So that would be a total of 4 more novels. Every 6 months, you're writing one, and you can do the writing and then the publishing, in sequence, or write the manuscripts and hold them and publish them or release for publishing. But then stage four is publish a series of 3 to 4 books every year. And you do that throughout your career. And literally, you're selling based on momentum. People are just buying it because you've got new books coming out. They know you as an author. Your marketing has to exist to a certain degree, but you never really jump into marketing. And I know authors that have done that. One example, a good example, is Susan May Warren. She wrote a really good book, by the way, called The Story Equation, which is if you want character development, I think that's a great view on character development. She started writing in 2003, and so I put these stats together in 2023. So it was about 20 years, and she had published 95 books in 20 years. And really was living off of momentum. Amazon rewards momentum because as you're publishing new content, they say, oh, the previous book did very well. And so you're doing that. But, you can't jump directly into that stage one and start off publishing 3 or 4 books a year. You don't have the skill. You don't understand the process, the publishing process and things like that. One of the advantages that you do get though is you're spending so much time writing that you quickly develop your craft of writing. Your craft of writing gets better faster than it would if you're writing a book every 2 to 3 years or something like that. It also
Yeah.
gets you to 20 books in 9 years. And keeps your readers engaged. But lots of downsides to that: potential for burnout. Your stories could end up being kind of formulaic because if you're churning them out that fast, then how much creativity can you put in it? How much time do you have for research if you have technical things about your stories that you need to research and things like that? And then there's a strong temptation to go, wow, I just don't have time to do a full developmental edit on this thing. So, I'm going to throw it in and do a little copy line stuff, maybe a proof and kick it out. So you just have to careful if you're going to take that kind of approach. And your marketing skills also develop very slowly because if you're writing that much, you just don't have time
Yeah.
to do the editing. Another
Yeah.
example of that, somebody that's a little bit more recent, is Misty Beller. So she started doing it in 2014. So by the time I pulled the statistics together, she had 9 years of writing, 39 books. Um, I was getting emails from her. I got on her email distribution list for a little while to kind of see how all that was working. And I was getting an email from her about every 3 months that a new book was coming out.
Yeah.
So it
Well,
is
yeah.
possible to do that. Now I
Yep.
want to hear your
Yeah.
pushback on that because
Yeah.
I know you have some concerns.
I have not a concern. I'll just say something kind of as we wrap up here because I so appreciate this insight, Bryan, and what you bring to it. And I think any author working with you would quickly realize you're very grounded in reality. You're a realist. Um, and I think you said it at the beginning. All of this is a function of time and resources. And those are the two main things you can bring as an author, time, resources, and maybe the third would be commitment to what you want to set out to do, like anything else. If you want to be the best farmer in your community, then you're going to set out to be the best farmer in your community. It's a commitment. Um, I think that I hear the quantity thing. I think on the other side, there is, and you mentioned this at the beginning, not necessarily hobby, but there is the purely creative self-expression, not just, and I don't mean to demean it, undercut anything you said, but there's the storytelling world of just lots of content, lots of sort of very genre specific, high volume. You got a series, you can write 2 or 3 books a year. There's that kind of writer. There's also a writer who's just really in it for the art and the self-expression and really searching for humanity and really after literary recognition of bringing a real poetic or whatever thoughtful, personal insight, worldview to the page, and that every chapter takes a month to write. And that's absolutely fine too, and may end up getting you very noticeable awards from big award folks like Nobel or Pulitzer or something like that. So it's not all, and you never said it was, but there are so many different ways to approach this business, but it does come down to who you are, what you want to do, and what you want to bring to it in terms of resources and time. And you said that at the beginning. I'm not disagreeing. Yeah.
Yeah, and now I don't want to be glib about it, but James Scott Bell, by the way, wrote another really good book on plot and structure, things like that. I was listening to he has a great books series or great courses series course that's how to best selling fiction, and he said the definition of literary fiction is fiction that doesn't sell. It can be fantastic. It can be, amazingly engaging and give you insights into life and things like that. But you're not going to make money at it. And most literary fiction authors probably aren't going to try to make money.
Well,
They want to get a worldview out or something like that,
well,
right?
there are some, there are definitely some, and there's no question. There's always there's hundreds of literary fiction writers who do very, very well, and there's a community for that. But there's only probably hundreds. There might be 2 or 3 per state. So as you start out, are you going to be one of those 2 or 3 per state that does extremely well and doesn't have to teach or do anything else or clean hotel rooms? So just plan ahead. We do have to wrap up. We've gone for almost uh, coming up on
Can I just
50.
mention the other two without going into detail on the other
Yep.
two
Yep.
career paths? One is a marketing heavy. So instead of going, full bore trying to get, 90 books out there or something like that, is get enough of a backlist out there, 4 to 6 books out there that you have actually something to market, and then switch over and focus very heavily on marketing. A good example of that is James Rubart, who only has about 10 books out there. 4 of them have Christie Awards, 2 of them have Carroll Awards, and 2 of them have Inspire Awards. And he built up that, but that's because he was a marketing expert, he had a marketing business before he started becoming an author. And with that one, you really follow the same beginning stages, but then only publish a book a year. but focus more heavily on the marketing. And then the last one that I kind of outlined was a hybrid where you would go full bore until you had 20 books instead of 6 to 10, and then shift over to marketing. You still want to publish maybe a book a year while you're doing that. But if you become an expert at marketing and you've got a backlist of 20 books, there you've got a lot of material that you can work with. So there's different ways to approach it, different ways to skin the cat. And there are people that are being reasonably successful. One of my Amazon ads clients right now is just getting ready to publish her seventh book in her series, and it was her debut series. So she did all the things differently than what I recommend to you here, the first books. But just in the Amazon account, just those that are attributable to the Amazon ads is pulling down $2,000 to $3,000 a year. And
Yeah.
so, excuse me, not a year, a month. Two or three thousand
Yeah.
dollars a month. Now
Wow.
she's spending money on
Wow.
ads to do that, but that's not her whole sales dashboard. That's just
Right.
the sales attributed to the ads.
Yep.
So
Yep. Very
it's
good.
possible, to take these
Right.
different approaches and make them work.
Right. Well, Bryan, this has been absolutely great, and we really appreciate it. You know what? We've had so many book and author recommendations. I'm going to wrap it up right there and
Okay.
not do the, we got so many names out there that people can go track down. So we really appreciate your time and insight, and wow, thank you for this great conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, and best of luck with your upcoming book.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.